So hi everyone. Thank you for joining our Youth Food Committee meeting. This is our last Youth Food Committee meeting of the year, and we are ending this year with our last installment of our speaker series. And we're joined with Ken from the Coalition for Healthy School Food. And I'm just going to start with a little land acknowledgement and then introduce Ken, and we'll jump into our presentation. So in York Region, we live and work on the traditional territories of the Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, and we acknowledged the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest Indigenous community. Many of our practices, including our organizational structure, the seeds we plant, the foods that we prepare, the ways we educate, and our methods of growing, harvesting, and preparing food, come to these lands through the ongoing process of colonialism. We seek to hold this understanding in our interactions and our engagements with this land and its people, as we are all treaty people and play a role in reconciliation. As we continue to meet as the Youth Food Committee, we need to hold this knowledge and understanding to actively incorporate it into our projects, events, and advocacy to the best of our abilities. So now I'll give Ken a bit of an introduction. Ken is the communications coordinator for the Coalition for Healthy School Food. Passionate about children's rights, international relations, and politics, he has been coaching badminton to young children at Lavoie High School since the age of 17. While working with several students, he's learned to adjust and adapt his communication style to guide students and eventually discovered his passion for communication. So he completed a bachelor's degree in political science and a certificate in public relations from the University of Montreal. He also worked as a communications assistant for the International Center for the Prevention of Crime, and he was a public relations, communication, and social media intern for UNICEF Canada. When Ken is not working, he loves to play tennis, ride his bicycle, and learn new languages. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to you, Ken.
Well, thank you so much, Sophie, for that introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me for today's presentation. So I would like to start off by doing a land acknowledgement because I am currently situated in Montreal. So I'm currently situated on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst many First Nations, including the Kanien'kehá:ka of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Huron-Wendat, Abenaki, and Anishinaabeg. We recognize and respect the Kanien'kehá:ka as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which we meet today. So the Coalition for Healthy School Food is committed to supporting the Kanien'kehá:ka and Haudenosaunee peoples, among other First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and Indigenous people globally. We work a lot with Indigenous communities across Canada. So this is why for us it's very important that when we do these land acknowledgements, we take the time to, give that importance, and they have a bigger voice that's going to be heard. And, we're going to be seeing this a lot in our discussions, but it's as lucky to have it, you guys invited me on a very special day, which is National Children's Day. For us, we want to celebrate, acknowledge, and promote children's rights across Canada. And we were very fortunate to have worked with several organizations such as Children's First Canada and UNICEF Canada, among other organizations. And we hope that one of the rights that we hope that the government of Canada will promote will be the right to a healthy and nutritious school food. So that's the one day to why we are advocating, or that's why the Coalition for Healthy School Food is advocating for that. But we're going to get into that when we're going to talk about who we are. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the Coalition for Healthy School Food is the largest school food network in Canada. So that comprises of 270 members and over 130 endorsers. So from every province and territory. Each and every one of these organizations, they all support us as we continue to advocate for a universal school food program in Canada. We are the only G7 country that does not have a national school food program. And this is quite worrisome when we talk about this type of discussion. And a month ago, we attended the very first School Meals Coalition Summit, which was held in Paris, France. We sent our top school food researcher, Dr. Emberly Roots, from the University of Saskatchewan. And we were quite embarrassed, to say the least, that we were one of the few countries that didn't have one yet, and no representation from the government of Canada, which is quite worrisome for our part. So, we were there because we have over 388 million children that is currently receiving meals right now across about 80% of schools across the globe. And for us in Canada, well, only 35% of schools, they have some form of school food programs, but they don't always directly get those funding. So it's been quite tough for most of these school food programs, and a lot of them, we've lost a couple of them, a dozen of them actually, throughout the month of July, August, and September. So it's been pretty rough when the priority was not there for school food programs. And for us, a healthy start for any other children or youth is very pivotal. It's one of the many things that's been a challenge for most Canadian families as well. Think about their budget, but also think about how they can provide food on the table for these students and for their children. So it's been very difficult right now for the current landscape, but we know for a fact that we are working hard. And this is where we get to some of the promises that some of the political parties have, which is the NDP promised $1 billion over 4 years, and the Liberal Party in their website about back in 2021 and 2022, the discussion was that they were going to dedicate a $1 billion funding over 4 years. So it's pretty difficult to see that we're in 2023 and nothing has been done so far. And we've worked really hard to send mandate letters to those political parties. And we've worked with MPs provincially, including in Ontario, where we were trying to have those discussions with Minister Parsa and different figures in Ontario right now so that we can have that push. Fortunately, they dedicated some funding in Ontario, but we still feel like there's a lot of work to be done. And this is why for us, school food is one of the many solutions to food insecurity right now. But it's not the only thing that we feel that it's going to respond. So this is the current landscape on the political side of things. In terms of the most important program, which is the National School Food Program that we wanted, on October 31st, the Government of Canada released a very important report called the What We Heard Report. This explains their consultation with the different stakeholders across Canada, including us, which we had the privilege of having that consultation and just providing a little bit of our feedback as to why there should be a national school food program. And over 80% of the stakeholders that they consulted, they all agree that they need a national school food program. And it's been very reassuring that these stakeholders across Canada has been voicing out the need to support kids, students, youth across Canada. But there's one little problem. As I mentioned earlier, they promised a dedicated funding, but in the policy, in the What We Heard report, there was no mention of a plan to dedicate funding. So this is a big problem for us because without any resources provided to these programs, they're going to continue to struggle and they're continue to struggle right now. So we'll talk a little bit more about the advocacy work that we're doing. So this year we introduced a new group called the Youth School Food Working Group. So we worked with several organizations such as Toronto Youth Cabinet, We worked with UNICEF Canada, like we mentioned earlier. We worked with several organizations across Canada to have their voice being heard, not just the advocates that are a little bit older, but some of the youth-led groups across Canada. And so we decided to build this working group. And this one is going to allow everybody to be a part of these advocacy campaigns and these engagements that we have. And having those informations of what the ministers are looking at and what are the language that are being adapted and adopted during this session. So for us, building this working group was very important because the people that are affected the most for school food will be students, mostly, regardless of what age category. So this is why for us, having their voices part of the working group was very important to us. So we're very happy that we started this off and that we're continuing to make this working group grow. And how we wish that the York Region Youth Food Committee would be involved. Well, we're asking that you could join our working group and we can join your working group as well, vice versa. Because we have the opportunity to connect with youth leaders across Canada about school food, who are on the ground and who are involved with these type of programs and understand the difficulties and the challenges that they face when they speak to their local MPs, their provincial MPs, and their federal MPs, and how they are trying to deal with it with the different fundings that they're provided them. Because different provinces have their different challenges. We've seen that with Alberta, we've seen that with Saskatchewan, and we've seen that with Manitoba. They haven't been the most cooperative as well when it comes to the model that they are looking for when it comes to addressing school food. So, we need more voices in terms of youth as well. And it's not just, and I think this point, I want to point across for the coalition side is we want to make sure that everybody's voices is heard from different parts and different backgrounds. And so that we can have that unified voice. This is why we want youth leaders across Canada to join this working group. And we want them to be leading these events. We don't want them to be in the background. We want them to lead. So this is why we have this type of working group, and we are hoping that we can have this building working relationships with everybody. So this is how you can get involved. So that ends our presentation. So thank you so much for taking the time, just taking a brief moment of time to talk about school food. And if you have any questions, there's the moment to ask him.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ken. That was an amazing presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, if that's okay, so we can have a bit of a talk. We have about 15 minutes to chat, so if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute or write in the chat. I do have a few questions, so I'll give people time to, ask their questions, and then I'll jump in. Maybe just to get the ball rolling, I'm happy to ask my first question. So you have extensive experience working in a variety of communications roles, as I've introduced you at the beginning. What led you to pursue this work specifically in the food justice sector?
As someone who's seen many students struggle getting food and seeing it firsthand, it means a lot to me. This is very personal to me. It was very personal to most of the chapters lead across Canada and how we're working on the political side of things and making it happen, something tangible happen in concrete. That's why I joined the Coalition for Healthy School Food, is because we're doing what we can and we're seeing the impact that we're having when we're meeting some of these organizations, not just in Canada, but internationally as well. Because we can see how much youth leaders, how they make a big impact in the conversation with the government. And it's funny, when we met Minister Suds about a couple of weeks ago, it was the kind of the sentiment that she had was that, you know, they're working hard to work with different leaders like us. And she was trying to give as much platform as well to the different organizations, which is something reassuring for the first time. We haven't heard a whole lot, you know, they were very quiet. And that to us, when you can see that the work that's been done right now is making a difference and they're seeing it, that's why I joined. It's, you can see it. You don't need to take a whole lot of your time to talk about it. We just want to do it. We just want to make that goal happen. So for us, food insecurity is such a large term, and I know school food is always associated with food insecurity. And I know when my students talk about it, they always try to figure out what that means when it comes to like, how am I being affected when I don't have food on the table? It's difficult. And you can see it firsthand. And when these school food programs are closed, you know, I can't help but get a little bit angry, upset, sad, all the different feelings that I have. Because, you know, organizations like, for example, these type of working groups, that's make all the difference. That's all we need is a platform. And sometimes they don't have that. So students, for me, I see them struggle, and sometimes they don't have that voice. So that's why I feel like, you know, I decided to join something that I know is making a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's like so relatable, like working in the food committee and even York Region Food Network, like you're doing, just like the coalition, you're doing work where you can see the implications of your actions and social justice. And yeah, very motivating.
I might ask a question if I can. So for the youth school food working group, you'd mentioned that we could possibly like join it to some extent. I was kind of curious what that would look like. Like, would it be one of our members coming to regular meetings, or like how does that look?
So what it will look like is it could be one of the members that you can recommend. That's good part. We want as much voices as possible. So for us, we're very flexible when it comes to having that type of discussion as well, and having their voices heard as well. That to me, we don't have that restriction as well. We want to make sure that everybody in different regions as well, they all have their challenges, and I want to make sure that we have that platform as well. So that's how it usually works for us, is we want them to speak, and if they disagree, go for it. Like, there's no reason not to disagree with something that we feel that it doesn't align with the primary goal, which is having a national school food program for children and youth.
Mhm. Excellent.
Maybe I'll just add like a question general to advocacy, like youth and advocacy in general. I was just curious, like for youth, like as you know, like advocacy, making your voice heard can be intimidating, and like especially for youth where we're made to feel sometimes like we're not qualified to talk on a topic. Um, and so I was just wondering, like, do you have any like advocacy tips or strategies or advice for youth who, let's say, someone who wants to be more proactive in their advocacy? What can they do?
Um, I think I can honestly say is in in 2023, most importantly, and I had this discussion with many youth advocates from UNICEF, and I think we're aligned with it a lot, is that sometimes they're not valued. Even with somebody that's a big organization like that, sometimes they can get neglected because, they're a youth advocate, but they can't be taken seriously because they're not a policy advisor, they're not an expert in their field or any other. But to be quite honest, some of these youth advocates, they're actually experts in their field. They know what they're talking about. They've experienced what it's like to have food insecurity, or talking about, women's rights, for example. You don't talk a whole lot about it, but there's that vision that they have. They know they can talk about it. They've spoken with so many of the same age categories, and they know what it's like. They've been there, and you have to give them the power to be valued, and you cannot just neglect them. I feel like when you let them become youth leaders, you give them the power to be more than just the title. They can be far, far bigger of an impact. And I can tell you firsthand, School Meals Coalition, when they did their organization, I know it's created by the United Nations, but that is led by a group of young people that had the willingness and the audacity to build summits across different countries and leading that. And to me, it takes courage. It takes courage when you have those type of leaderships, and youth advocates sometimes are being forgotten, and they're just there. So I think it's important that we have that conversation all the time, to value them and just to give them bigger platforms as well. And in communications, more than anything, there are so many ways to make them valued. And there's no better than National Children's Day as well today, on how many platforms that you can reach out to them and those youth advocates when they speak up. So that to me is the type of tips and advice that I would have for youth advocates. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak up, because you'll be amazed how these ministers, these politicians, they will listen when they take the time. When you take the time to speak up, they will take the time to listen. And it's incredible how much of an impact your words and your actions matter.
Mhm. Absolutely. So it's also like half the battle is being able to work with youth to like give youth that platform where they feel that they can express themselves and voice their opinions, and kind of like the coalition's youth group, and then your region, your region youth group committee, these platforms.
Yeah, and I think even more so is that when you give them that platform, you're going to see that there are more youth that are going to be joining along to fight. They're gonna feel comfortable being a part of something that they know that's making a difference and an impact. So I can't say, I just smile every single time that a student speaks up, and they don't have any filter, and they decide to talk about something, and we didn't realize that there's no title associated with them, but they're able to express what everybody was thinking of to begin with. And just having the confidence and bravery to do that is all the more rewarding for me. And it will last for a very long time, and it gives others the courage to follow suit.
Mhm. Awesome. So we just have about 4 minutes left. If anyone else has, lingering thoughts about the national school food policy, um, even the working group that Ken was talking about, feel free to put it in the chat or turn off your mic. Yeah, I'll give this opportunity to everyone.
Everyone's being so quiet tonight. This isn't normal for a group. There's always someone who speaks up. Yeah, I guess I'll maybe ask one more question I sort of have lingering in my head. Do you have any sort of like advocacy materials that we could use to help promote like the message that you're trying to get across?
Yeah, so we have some letter. I'm going to send it. I'm gonna send it by email, but we have made letters so that we can send out to politicians in your local in your local area, so that way you can talk about it and have that conversation with your MPs, and they actually take the time to read it as well. But we also have something coming up next week, which is going to be a run in Ottawa as well. So we're going to be doing a run for school food, which is going to be happening on I would say the 29th of November. And we're going to be doing this to, we have one of the teachers from British Columbia who's going to be flying in. He's already in Ottawa, and he did he did 200 laps, which is 80 kilometers in an entire day for school food. And it's been quite impressive to see him still have his legs attached to his body. So that's always fun to see, but he's been advocating for school food and a national school food program. So he'll be doing that run in Ottawa, and we are working right now with, we got the permission from the House of Commons, from Parliament, that we could be having that space there. So it's gonna be, everything is going to work out next week, but I'll be able to share it by email for everything. So yeah,
yeah, that'd be really great, and then we could share with folks. Sorry, Katrina, you go ahead.
Oh, I just have a question. So I was just curious, Kate, this is a bit different from the advocacy. I joined a bit late, so perhaps you covered it, but I was just curious with school food programs. I know there's like lots of talk on like the national level, and I think I heard you mention that like funding is hard to secure, like especially through the federal government. It was promised and then it didn't, or they said they would, but then it didn't happen. So what's kind of like, what do you think the plan B is? Like, do you think provinces should adopt their like provincial school food programs, or what? Like, obviously advocacy for a national school food program would be the ideal, but what do you think we could do? Or like, what, I don't know. Yeah. Like, what's the backup plan?
So you're absolutely right, Katrina. And it's funny when we're talking about the backup plan for provincial side of things for funding, because in each context, it seems like every minister has their list of reasons as to why a budget should work, and there's different language and approach. But for us, the province and local municipal governments have been like pivotal. We wanted to do it automatically, and we don't always depend. Our ultimate goal is having a national school food program with an actual $1 billion funding. That's what we want. But we know for a fact that different contexts are forcing the approaches to be different, especially in Ontario. We Minister Parsa is very optimistic, and he did give a little bit of funding, but he's not willing to put in the words of, I want a national school food policy. It's treading that line, and when we have that discussion with Minister Parsa, it seems like he likes to listen to youth groups, and he likes to listen, air quotes, to youth groups. So it's not always the most reassuring thing where it goes through his ears and it goes in the brain. That's what we want. So we know Minister Parsa has been working very hard, though. Just all jokes aside, he's working very hard, with different groups as well. But we know full well that different contexts for different provinces, and we're very fortunate for British Columbia that they have a dedicated funding. That was a monumental news in the British Columbia side. And Nova Scotia is going to be coming up soon, hopefully have a bigger news as well. But there are progress being made for each and every context. So that's how we approach it. So it's focusing on the local and the provincial side, and the hopes that the federal government will do what they can. So
Yeah, thanks so much for explaining that.
Awesome. So if no one else has any last minute questions, Ken, thank you again so much for joining us. You are amazing. You're doing amazing work, and I'll let you go. Or those who are here who are not part of the Youth Food Committee are welcome to stay if you would like. We're just going to proceed with our meeting, talking about next year and last minute stuff to wrap up the year. But yeah, thank you very much for your time.
yeah, have a nice evening, everyone, and hopefully you have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, Jen.